in the North Carolina judicial system. It dealt with not only how we treat the public, but how we operated internally. It dealt with gender as well as race. It was established by order of the court in October of 2020. And then, in January of 2023, the Chief Justice refused to reappoint the members of that committee. The new members of our court very much see themselves as a conservative bloc. They talk about themselves as, quote, the conservatives, unquote. Their allegiance is to their ideology, not to the institution. There were two times when one of my colleagues publicly tried to embarrass me, and in the context of the case and the oral argument, was not only my perception. Other people in the courtroom at the time were shocked and surprised because that isn't how our court operates, at least in the past. The current party in power doesn't think that there are any problems of racial discrimination in our justice system. And so, why would you have training on implicit racial bias if there is no such thing as racial discrimination or racial bias, right? That's their worldview. And then she ends her statement by saying a doctrine of neutrality is in and of itself a political decision because neutrality upholds the status quo. End of her statement. Now, Justice Earls has sued the Judicial Standards Commission for trying to discipline her for making that statement. Her lawsuit claims that her comments on diversity are protected as First Amendment political speech. Now, switch from that to my perspective. She's absolutely right, positively, without question. You know, it's a strange thing in this world when people who take positions don't even want to take the heat for taking their own positions. If the Chief Justice of the court disagrees with Justice Earl, he has a right to say it. But certainly she had a right to say what she said. And he has to acknowledge that. This is a court which when they got in, went back and did something I've never seen. I'm 71 years old and I've been practicing law for 40-some years. I've never seen a court go back, circle back, change the decisions of a prior court without having something brought in. Ever. That should have gotten more coverage in the press, in my opinion, because it was phenomenally outrageous. Secondly, the Chief Justice himself makes speeches. I've been to some of them, believe it or not. And he makes comments about political things. No one tries to stop him. So why does he want to stop Justice Earls? Once there was a great philosopher in this country named William Fulbright from Arkansas. He wrote a book called The Arrogance of Power. And I'm suggesting to you that that same theme is at play here. There's a certain amount of arrogance when a person not only doesn't see the problem of racial discrimination in the justice system, and I assure you it is there. I served in it for 17 years as a judge, and I still practice in it. But not only does he not see it, he dares those who do say it to say anything. That's bizarre. Why not just come out and debate it? Say, I don't see it. We've made it to the promised land. We don't see race anymore. Some say. Well, then argue your point, and we will tell you our life experience. And Justice Earls is doing this. She absolutely has a positive bedrock First Amendment right to do so. We support her. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I neglected to say I am Senator Candy Smith, the first Vice Chair of the Legislative Black Caucus. Our next speaker is going to be Senator Paul Lowe.
Thank you for taking the time out to be here. think my colleague, Representative Jones, have pretty much covered most of what I was going to say when I talk about Justice Earls being an exceptional justice and doing an exceptional job. But when we start looking at this business of race and diversity, I think it was W.E.B. Du Bois said the problem of the 21st century would be the problem of the color line. And anytime you discuss anything that deals with the experience of African Americans, with many within our society, within our state, and within our court, it becomes a problem. But I don't think there's a way we can get away from it. And I think that free speech is something that is not only important, but is something that ought to be protected at every level of our society. There are things that are going on in the court system, and just maybe someone that is a part of that system but left on the outside, we can't allow them to be silenced, because when we allow them to be silenced, that means our democracy is being chipped away. So I stand with Justice Earl along with all of my colleagues. I certainly thank all of you for being here and for those persons that are responsible for setting up this press conference, because these are issues that we must fight. And these are issues that we must speak against for the good of all, for the good of the oppressed and the good of the oppressor. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Senator Lowe. And our last speaker will be Representative Alan Boinsey. I'm going to get it right. Alan Boinsey. Thank you so much. And after that, we're going to open the floor for questions.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Representative Alan Boinsey. I represent District 56 in Orange County. And here really to talk from the perspective of a lawyer. I'm a lawyer myself. And I first want to put this in context. It's been less than 100 years in North Carolina that we've had black lawyers. And Justice Anita Earls, before she became a justice, she was a lawyer herself. And over the course of that history, in the less than 100 years that black folks have been allowed into the legal profession, they have had to overcome so much. They've had to overcome Jim Crow, segregation, and you'd be hard-pressed to say that in that time period that we've fully rectified and that we've fully gotten to the promised land in terms of the equal treatment of folks. And so, you fast forward to today, and you have a justice who has been a black lawyer herself, when you have other black lawyers who are trying to make their way, when you have young people, children, who are aspiring to be lawyers themselves, and they see in the press that a black woman justice is being targeted because of her free speech about issues that are very relevant to the legal profession, because we haven't gotten there yet. We haven't gotten to that promised land. So she's using her free speech in a way to try to advance us, to try to advance the legal profession. And when folks in the public see that she's being targeted because of that, think about what that does to a person. Think about what that does to a lawyer who is trying to advocate the best they can for their client. I can easily see a situation in which, as a result of what is being done to Justice Earls, a black lawyer or a lawyer of color goes to a courtroom and they think twice about something that they say on behalf of their client. I mean, a lawyer's job is to advocate fiercely for their client, and for them to have, or to feel like they have one hand tied behind their back because, they're concerned that they might, be come down upon because they've used their speech in a way that's maybe disagreeable to folks who don't maybe share the same kind of understanding of our society and how things work. that hampers the ability of lawyers. That hampers the ability of the legal profession to advance. And the other thing I'll say, too, is that, as I said before, Justice Anita Earls, she was a great lawyer before she became a justice. Our judges, our justices, they are folks who have practiced law. They are folks who have been lawyers for a long time themselves. And so I can also see where, a black lawyer who is maybe thinking about running for judge or thinking about running for justice, where they see all this happening, and this can discourage them. This can discourage some of North Carolina's brightest and best from running for judge, from being arbiters of the law in a fair way, and really, in the end, keeping the demographics and diversity of not just judges, but clerks and everything else that comes in the judiciary at very low levels of diversity. And so I just want to say that this has massive implications, not just in the context of judges, but also in the context of the lawyer profession and in the context of our society in the state. So I thank y'all, and I'll turn it back over to Senator Smith.
All right, so if there's any questions.
I had a question for Representative Jones, going back to something you said. I think you had mentioned, Justice Newby specifically working to stop Justice Earls from speaking out on this. And I was just curious if there's been any direct indication of that, or if it's just your own understanding of how the Judicial Standards Commission works. I mean, it's kind of a secretive group that I think a lot of us in the public don't know a lot about.
Well, I don't know if I can give up my sources, as you Prescott said. But rest assured, what I told you is accurate.
Well, I'll keep going if nobody else has other questions. I was also wondering, recently Justice Morgan stepped down off the court, obviously a black man who was on the Supreme Court. Was there a pressure on the governor to appoint another African-American lawyer to take his place on the court? And I'm just curious if anyone here can answer that.
This conversation is not about Justice Morgan, who is retired. This is about what is happening with Justice Anita Earls, so we're not able to speak to that.
I'm Senator Gladys Robinson, representing Guilford County District 28, and I've been here almost 14 years now. But I want to say that this also is about the issue of the separation of the powers of government in terms of judicial. And the press needs to acknowledge to people that the judicial branch should be nonpartisan, should be fair, and should be equal. And for Justice Earls to say that things are going on that impact the ability of the court to be fair and to have equal rulings in terms of what's going on, ignoring who people are in terms of color, in terms of race, in terms of gender, in terms of party, is a threat to our government. And so we need to acknowledge that what is going on, the Supreme Court is denying the rights of all of the citizens of the state of North Carolina.
You have a question?
I just wanted to ask, so it appears to me that the way the Judicial Standards Commission was set up, it didn't always have confidential complaints and investigations. That was somewhat of a recent change. Is there support among your caucus for making those investigations and complaints open to the public?
I'm going to ask the judges.
I understand your question, but the problem with that is when you're a judge, I did it for 17 years, there can be complaints that have confidential information in it. And to be fair to those who serve us on the bench, we have to be fair to them, make sure that they are indeed substantiated rather than just to put it out there. And so I think the confidentiality is to protect the integrity of our courts, make sure that people aren't attacked unduly. And then, there's a time to publicize. Once you publicize, you can't get it back. So you have to be careful. Thank you.
I'll say real quick, serving Mecklenburg County State Senate. Serving Mecklenburg County's North Carolina State Senate District. If you remember in the Senate budget recently, they made reforms to the Judicial Standards Commission, and that's unfortunate because they've removed attorneys from that Judicial Standards Commission, which were appointed by the State Bar, a neutral group of individuals. Now they've made it purely political, which tells you this is a political hit job on Justice Earls, a woman of integrity, highly intelligent, an amazing scholar of legalese at the end of the day. And you have this political change in our courts, like you heard Senator Robinson talked about. We're supposed to have 3 branches of government. We talk about educational reforms in our state and teaching our children about education. Well, there's 3 branches of government, not 1 branch of government. And what the North Carolina General Assembly is doing is consolidating power again and again. They've taken over judicial races by making them partisan elections instead of them being nonpartisan, because again, judges should be above the fray. You've seen the taking away of appointment authority from a governor. Doesn't matter if it's a Republican governor in the future or currently a Democratic governor, because now we've got special Superior Court judges that are going to be appointed to 8-year terms in the Senate budget. And you've got changes to the Judicial Standards Commission, and making those appointments now purely by the General Assembly. So the press needs to think about, the people out there need to think about who is going to be appointed to the Judicial Standards Commission to hold judges accountable. These are going to be purely political appointees. These are going to be their donors, and that's a travesty in our justice system. So let's make sure we support people like Justice Earls and legal scholars who are not politicians, but dedicated public servants that serve every single North Carolinian. Thank you.
Any other questions on that mic drop? No other questions? But we thank you so much for your attendance. Thank you.